Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb has called workforce development the state's Achilles heel. He's made growing the state's pool of skilled workers a top priority since he took office, but it's not the kind of problem you can fix overnight. My colleague Lindsay Wright joins me now. I know Holcomb's efforts are continuing this year, and we'll get to those laws in a little bit. But can you give us a little bit of background first about what's being done in the state in terms of workforce development?
Yeah, so there's the Next Level Jobs Initiative, which is part of Holcomb's agenda. That includes the Workforce Ready Grant, which pays for tuition for Hoosiers getting training and a certificate in some of these high-demand fields. STEM programs have been a core pillar for Holcomb and policymakers. Holcomb has required every school in the state to offer computer science programs, but they're not required to take them. But it shows the conversation has really been pushed into K through 12 schools. A four-year degree is not the only option. The state very much wants kids to know that.
So how will some of the bills at the State House this session help advance those efforts even more so?
Holcomb wants to put more money toward these efforts. It's a budget year, so he wants to see increased funding toward that Workforce Ready Grant. A couple other numbers, he wants to see $3 million a year for computer science training, $2 million a year for high school career counseling. There's also a Senate bill that would give tax credits to people who donate to organizations that enhance career and technical opportunities for students. That was authored by Senate Education Committee Chair Jeff Ratz, who has flat out said workforce development is center stage, one of his top priorities. So the conversation around this really continues to expand. Holcomb has brought up other topics that he then connects back to workforce development, like childcare, teacher pay. So many things connect, and that kind of brings me to the story I worked on this week, another connection. It's a massive problem that has only amplified the workforce shortage.
All right, well, let's take a look.
Yeah.
At Tomlinson Manufacturing in Indianapolis, the motto is simple: we make stuff.
Probably the majority of our work comes from the trucking industry, but small parts components that's out of aluminum, a myriad of steels, and then plastics. There's a ton of industrial plastics we've gotten into too.
Tomlinson is a relatively small company, and still, Tomlinson says she has a hard time finding the skilled employees she needs.
I need, theoretically, at least 2 more people. I need those people so that they can float back and forth. Everyone can check. It needs to be a team. I do not have that now.
Tomlinson has tried to recruit skilled workers at trade schools and job fairs, but there's just not enough interest. And on top of that, Tomlinson says there's a serious lack of critical thinking and math skills. The Indiana Department of Workforce Development estimates there will be more than 1 million jobs to fill in the state in the next 5 years.
When you're a state that makes things and you don't have people available to make them, that has an impact.
So there aren't enough workers, and those who are interested often don't have the skills. But let's add another barrier into the mix: the drug crisis. It's not only tearing families apart, ravaging communities, but it's exacerbating the workforce shortage. At Belden, a transmission company in Richmond, about 10% of applicants were failing drug tests.
And so it made us start to take notice, and we need to increase the labor pool, not shrink it. And so we're doing lots of things to expand the opportunity for people to go into manufacturing careers.
Pathways to Employment is the first of its kind rehabilitation program. It takes an individualized approach. If a job candidate fails a drug test, they're referred to a treatment provider. There, they can do an assessment which determines the risk for substance use disorder.
Once we bring them into the plant and they start working, they start on safety-conscious jobs, and then after a certain period of time, we would allow them to operate machinery.
The employees must pass ongoing drug tests. Schrader says because of the shortage, companies are tapping into populations they previously wouldn't have, like kids out of high school or people with criminal records. Belden is doing the same thing.
I personally applaud them. It's a risk, to be certain, and the risk must be acute because they're taking that risk on the front end.
Charlie Powers knows the risks all too well. He's the president of Quality Fabricated Solutions, another small business which actually operates out of the same building as Tomlinson. Using laser cutters and welding practices, these workers make a little bit of everything. Powers says he typically brings on people who have no former training because it's hard for him to compete with larger companies. And he loses some potential workers when they find out QFS does random drug testing. For current employees, it's not necessarily a one-and-done policy here at QFS. Powers says it depends on the situation, but the goal is to give workers another chance.
First off, it's very expensive to train, so it's cheaper for me to work with somebody, try to help them, than it is just to say you're done and bring somebody else in and start that training process over.
But balancing those efforts with safe working practices can be difficult.
It's my job as the owner of the company to make sure that everybody else has a safe work environment, right? Not just the other employees, but themselves.
There are no easy answers, but certainly these companies welcome any help the state can offer. Tomlinson says she'd love to get a pool of candidates with experience, but right now she'll settle for workers with the simple desire to make stuff.
And Joe, there are a number of opioid-related bills going through the legislature as well, whether it has to do with protections for people using syringe exchange programs, or there are various topics being, looking to be studied. But unfortunately, we've heard it so many times, the drug crisis knows no boundaries. This is just another example of that, and it's incredibly complicated.
And you helped make it not complicated. Thank you very much,
I don't
Lindsay.
know about that, but you're welcome.